goal always is to hire the most competent and capable people from our community to do the work that is in our community. I'll tell you, it is a challenge to find places to live in this community, including for our current staff. And so one of the challenges we hear and discuss on a daily basis internally is, how do I find a place as a professional living and working in this community, or working in this community, to live in this community? So yes, our staff, our goal is that all of our staff are embedded in our communities that we're serving, because we believe in an incarnational model where we say we are part of this community, therefore we work for this community. That would be our goal. And the goal for the folks who work in the commercial space, that we're fostering local businesses that are supporting local employment. And we know that this community, we've read your strategic goals, is about making this the kind of community that people want to live in. It is the kind of community we want to live in. And how do we make that possible for people who are professionals in these fields?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Huffman. I apologize.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin. May I ask a question of Mr. Johnson? And that would be, what would the impact dollar per taxpayer be on $250,000 if it was a full hit to the levy?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Huffman, $250,000 represents approximately
0.25%.
0.4%. $840,000 is 1% on your levy. So 250 divided into that. I don't have my calculator in front of me.
Okay, if you can take a second and figure it out. So just so I know exactly what that dollar amount would be impact per taxpayer. Just curious. You're terrible.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it'd be 0.3%.
0.3%.
Correct.
And so a dollar amount?
That I would have to go back and calculate. I can do that if you like over the next couple minutes.
Okay, that would be perfect. Thank you. And I just want to add that, again, with social services and with any kind of programs like this, new funding pots become available all the time. It is not uncommon to get calls, on a Friday at 4 o'clock saying you've got a week and get something up and going with the program. So I'm very confident, again, in that. And I do want to just mention a couple other things. One, we have a project that I believe it's called the Community Hub. And there were some individuals, there was some argument per se that not everyone would use these services, whether they couldn't get to them or whether they didn't live close enough. But we are moving forward with that project because we have vision and because we know that this is a legacy project and this is something that is in the best interest of Norfolk County. And I do find it a tad ironic that some of the funding that could become available is money that we have committed to the hospital, which in one argument I'm hearing from people saying this Indwell project is Ministry of Health, it's not, on the municipal levy. As a council, previous councils, I guess, have saddled me as a current council with the obligation of funding the hospital. To be clear, I have absolutely no issue with providing municipal dollars for our local hospital. So there's that, and then the other fact is that we may have many residents who live more on the east side of Norfolk County or on the west side who say that they use different hospitals. So they may question why Norfolk County would fund one hospital when many of the residents go to others. So this isn't just cut and dry, and it's just not, we don't have the money, we can't do it. I'll wait for James's figure there, but again, just to clarify that there are funding pots that become available all the time. And I just wanted, again, to make sure that I understood Heidi correctly, that with the OP funding, there's approximately $700 to $750,000. And even if we had a full hit of that funding, 250, that still leaves 500,000 to provide affordable housing within Norfolk County.
So, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Huffman, we have $732,700 in OFI funding this year. There's about $15,000 in what's called COCHI funding, which is the Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative. That funding is specifically for some of our social housing providers for capital repairs. So that's where I got the total of 750. So of the 732, the investment plan that staff are suggesting to council includes a $250,000 contribution to Indwell. It includes money for our local housing corporation to do capital repairs, and it includes money for a housing stabilization bank for our social housing tenants to help with last month's rent and rent arrears so that they don't become evicted out of social housing. Because once people are evicted from social housing, they are homeless and it is very difficult to rehouse them. So we have worked really hard to prepare an investment plan for both of these new pots of money that will spread the widest net possible across our existing social housing system, along with this potential new affordable supportive housing community.
All right, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Huffman. So we brought up the spreadsheet that we use to calculate what the median household's effect is with the levy. And if we add $250,000 to the levy, it's an annual impact of $6.72.
So $6.72 per year?
That's correct.
That would be the impact. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin. I think we've come to a time where we should have a motion on the floor, so I would like to move what was voted on last week in its entirety as represented by staff. Staff report HSS 1936, Norfolk Inn redevelopment, request for county support be received as information. That council approve the one-time contributions of the redevelopment of the Norfolk Inn as outlined by the staff report. And further, that council approve an annual operating grant for the Norfolk Inn redevelopment with a maximum limit of $250,000 per year for a period of 20 years commencing in 2020, and that staff be directed to actively seek out federal and provincial funding sources for this grant each year in order to minimize the amount of the grant to be funded as a municipal contribution, and further that this information be provided to council each year as part of the presentation of social services and housing department budget, and further that Norfolk County enter into a contribution agreement with Indwell to be registered on title of the Norfolk Inn to protect the county investment in the event that the property is sold.
Seconder. Councillor Rabbits. Further discussion. Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. And we heard, thank you, and we heard just recently, I thought it was 1/4%, 1% on everybody's tax bill for 2020 and continuing for 20 years, totaling $5 million. Now I find out that it's 0.3, actually more than a third, more than 1/4, and it's $6.72 a year per household. So I'm going to put a deferral of this motion on the floor, that the financial request from Indwell for redevelopment of the Norfolk Inn, Simcoe, be deferred to the 2020 budget discussions, because that's really where it should be going for discussion, along with all the other budget requests that we're going to have to deal with, because believe me, it's going to be a real tough budget session come 2020.
Okay, a deferral trumps the original motion, so we need a seconder for a deferral. Councillor Van Passen. And sure.
I do know a little bit about municipal drains, but this is not my area of expertise. But I do know that earlier on, we had a presentation from a couple of young ladies that one's pregnant with cancer, got 2 kids with special needs a place to live. And her mother's willing to spend her own money to set up a trailer or a tiny home on her property. And we charge her money for the pleasure of doing business with us to pay for an application fee to allow for that. And that seems acceptable, but we're more than happy to shell out $7,800 a year to subsidize a
Point of order.
bed for somebody. So that's why I'm supporting this deferral, because I'd like to look at the big picture as well.
We got a point of order here. Yes, Mayor Chop.
Well, one, there's no debate on the deferral. There's some other issues with that part of the conversation from the clerk, but there shouldn't be any debate.
Okay, so we have a seconder for the deferral.
And can we get a recorded vote on the deferral as well?
Recorded vote, Mr. Griselle?
All right. Mayor Chop.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
No.
Councillor Michele.
No.
Councillor Huffman.
No.
Councillor Van Passen. Yes. Councillor Martin.
No.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits. Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
The motion is defeated 5-4.
I think we're ready to, we have a motion from Councillor Taylor on the floor, and Councillor Michele would like to speak to it, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm wondering if Councillor Taylor would be amenable to a friendly amendment to, and I do believe that Mr. Cubitt was agreeable to this in some form or other, that the annual operating grant period, if we can include the review period, which we will refer to as the opt-out opportunity, be given at 10 years, if that would be agreeable.
That would be agreeable.
So just to clarify, an opt-out clause in a contract.
That's right, Madam Mayor. Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Okay, I believe we need a seconder for the motion. Councillor Huffman. Any further discussion? Mayor Chop. Councillor Columbus.
Well, recorded vote, please.
Mayor Chop.
I just feel that even 10 years, there's a lot of things this council wants to do, including the hub and land purchases, and we are so far over budget and so many capital projects already this year that, you know, money doesn't grow on trees in Norfolk County, and I think that Councilor Columbus is right, and we are going to have a tough time come budget deliberations this year.
Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin. Respectfully, Mayor Chop, money doesn't grow on trees in any county. So anyways, just want to make that point. And again, just in looking at the bottom line is that, yes, there are projects, but if we don't do this one, I strongly feel that we will regret this. And as Councillor Rabbit said, we'll never know what could have been. And I don't even see it as a leap of faith. I just see it as a step forward.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Not only does money not grow on trees, but we got to borrow the money to cut down dead ones in Norfolk County. Last week, I think we had a road project that was, what, $300,000 over budget. We had another one that was close to $1 million over budget, another one that was $300,000 over budget. We spent over $1.5 million extra last week. Well, we're going to approve them in these, or we did in this agenda. We spent $1 million last week we didn't have. So what the heck, might as well spend $5 million more that we don't have, because the feds do it and the province does it. We're just rolling along with the same program, I guess.
Okay, I'm seeing no further discussion. We've got a recorded vote. I'll pass it over to Andy Griselle.
So this is on the amendment, and that the county include a provision in the contract to allow council to opt out of the contract after 10 years. And we'll go around the other way. Councillor Geisens? Councillor Rabbits?
Yes.
Councillor Columbus?
No.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen?
No.
Councillor Huffman?
Yes.
Councillor Michele?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Chop?
No.
Okay, the motion carries. So now we'd be on the main motion as amended. I'm assuming recorded vote on that one.
Why not?
It makes it easier for me when I get a lot of them in a row to do the minutes, so just joking. All right, so we'll go around. This is the main motion as amended. Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Michele.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
No.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
No.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens. Mayor Chop.
No.
The motion carries 5-4.
All right. Okay, the next item that was pulled, Councillor Taylor, if you want to take that over, that was in regards to the BIA.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I pulled the motion to ensure the BIA that they would have an opportunity to speak to the changes, and we had that opportunity actually on Friday. Some members of the BIA sat down with the treasurer, and we had a lengthy conversation. So there are some questions coming out of that, but we will get those answers in good time, so no need to discuss it any further.
Okay, so you want to move, okay, so if we could have a motion then to approve the BIA bylaw?
And Councillor Huffman, I believe, has another motion associated to this issue. Sorry, it's on the next one.
Isn't that the draft BIA?
It'll be 12.
Okay, so, first motion is that report CAO 19-26B received as information and that the draft Simcoe BIA bylaw be presented to council for adoption. That's been moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Michele. All those in favor? And that's carried. The next motion, moved by Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Martin, that staff be directed to publicly release financial information upon the Simcoe BIA, and that financial staff be directed to include a summary and detailed background upon the Simcoe BIA debt. All those in favor? And that's carried. Absolutely. I just wanted to get through the last. And I think that's it, so let's break for 15 minutes. Okay, if we're ready to get going again, I just, I feel compelled to just read this one little piece of information. The clerk had dug up the resolution that I had asked about on 3 separate occasions, and first was told that there was no previous such resolution from council, and then I was told today that it was a 10-year commitment from Inwell, and in fact, the resolution that took place in February of 2015, so not that long ago, was that staff report HS 15-09, award of request for proposal for HSS 14-01, affordable housing development be received as information, and that council approves the proposal from Inwell to construct 26 one-bedroom and 9 bachelor units of affordable housing located at 190 Dean Street in Simcoe as a Hamilton Hall, and further that council approves a capital funding allocation for the above project from the Haldeman and Norfolk counties notional allocation for the investment in affordable housing in the amount of $2 million. And further, that staff be directed to submit the proposal to Inwell to develop affordable housing to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval for funding from the Investment in Affordable Housing Program. And further, that once ministry approval is received in the form of conditional letter of commitment, council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a contribution agreement with Inwell in accordance with the service manager administration agreement between Norfolk County and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and program guidelines for investment in affordable housing. And further, that staff be directed to negotiate a 25-year operating agreement with Inwell for Hamilton Hall Affordable Housing Project, which includes an annual operating grant of $160,000. So, moving on.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through Councillor Tyler. I wasn't here at the time of those resolutions, so I'm going to ask Ms. Van Dyke to speak to clarify the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Council. My recollection of that discussion was that the motion that Mayor Chop just read was not approved by Council at the time. Staff were redirected to go back, and there was a second resolution that was brought forward for an operating agreement only with a term of 10 years. The operating agreement for Hamilton Hall has a 10-year term, and all of the funding is funded through the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative, and I would be pleased to work with the clerk to provide a copy of that operating agreement to this council.
Thanks, Heidi. I would like to see that. This was regular council meeting Tuesday, February 24th, 2015, and it does say that the motion was carried. Okay, so on to Energy Conservation Committee meeting minutes, July 9th, 2019. Is there any discussion on that? Energy Conservation Committee meeting minutes. Motion moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. That the Energy Conservation Committee meeting minutes from July 9th be received as information. All those in favor? That's carried. The next one is the Heritage Committee minutes from April 29th. Is there any discussion on those? Councillor Hoffman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Chop. I have a couple questions from reading those minutes. I understand that there was mention of some issues regarding the Good Bread Company, and I was wondering if we could get a further explanation. I've done a little bit of research, and it was also brought to my attention that there has been damage and demolition of designated heritage items at the Good Bread Company, and I was wondering if we could get an update on that. And the other issue that I wanted to get a further explanation on is that there was a home in Waterford that was not in compliance with their heritage status, and just wondering what the details are and the course of action when a home is not in compliance. Thank you.
Is there somebody that, Mr. Baird?
Chop, if I could jump in for my colleagues, the Heritage and Culture Department falls with under DCS, Development and Culture, and we can take those comments back and have Melissa Culver provide a response to council to answer your questions, if that would be acceptable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baird.
Councillor Michelli.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I may If Councillor Huffman will be willing to accept some partial explanations, I am the council representative on the Heritage Committee. The first question you had was about the Good Bread Company, which is located in Victoria. It was found to be in non-compliance with the Heritage Act. Some very significant architectural features on the second floor had been removed, and there was some significant damage done to some of them, and that, unfortunately, there was actually a tour of that place by the Heritage Committee. I was not able to attend with them, but they indicated that they were very disappointed in the condition and the work that the owner had gone ahead with without permission, and they felt that he did so knowing full well that he did not comply with the Heritage Act. And the second query you had, can you remind me what the detail was?
Yes, there was a home in Waterford that
Yes.
was deemed to be not in compliance.
Yes, thank you. So there, that home in Waterford, I believe that the staff is in contact with the owners of that home, and I do believe that there is some discussion right now about whether or not the work that they have planned can go forward. And I believe that that is where that project is right now. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Councillor Huffman, could you direct me to the page about the Good Bread Company? I have not seen it. And then in the meantime, Councillor Columbus? Oh, I see it. There it is. Okay, thanks. Councillor Columbus?
Just to make note, I recall several times where properties deserved this heritage designation, and people that bought them or lived there wanted to make changes, and it was a very, very high, quite a high cost compared to doing it the way they wanted to do it. So everybody that's involved with this Heritage Act and this designation should be very careful what they ask for, because there is an extra cost to living up to the heritage designation requirements.
Councillor Huffman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Columbus. I appreciate that, but the fact would be is that if someone is purchasing one of these buildings, they're going into it eyes wide open, that they're aware that there is a heritage designation to this structure. So I would anticipate with a good business plan that an individual would be prepared to do any kinds of renovations that would meet the criteria and the standards of the Heritage Act.
My only comment on that with Rick from the Good Bread Company is I've been down there, and I mean, if, you know, I guess this is where we have to get the rest of our house in order, because he was how many years in site plan control on that building, and it's not a matter of not having a good business plan, it's a matter of constantly being subjected to, I mean, it was to the point, I think, that it was almost barely viable anymore. Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I wonder if I could pose a question to Councillor Michelli, because I see that planning staff is not here at the moment. Do you have any comments that you can share, page 153 at the bottom, with regards to Meisner fertilization redevelopment and the committee's displeasure with the report not being circulated to them?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Martin, I actually do know a little bit about this one. There was, and if you recall, we previously, very recently, had a presentation by Mr. Arians on that project, and there was some suggestion by him that, in fact, if you recall, I did actually query him about whether or not there was going to be some historical incorporation into the design. And he said at that time that they would not make any moves of any kind of heritage value without consulting the Norfolk Heritage Committee. And so when the original staff report went out on that project, the Norfolk Heritage Committee, for whatever reason, and they have made that position known to staff, that they were a little bit baffled, honestly, as to why they were not circulated on the intentions of that project, and that's what that's about.
Anything further? Okay, there's a motion moved by Councillor Michelli, seconded by Councillor Van Passen, that the Norfolk Heritage Committee minutes from April 29th, 2019 be received as information. All those in favor? It's carried. Next are I think that we'd kind of jumped ahead, but those two issues came up under the May 27th minutes. But that the Norfolk Heritage Committee minutes from May 27th be received as information. Again, moved by Councillor Michelli, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? Carried. And finally, that the June 13th, 2019 minutes of the Telecommunications Advisory Committee be received as information. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Martin, and seconded by Councillor Geisens. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, that wraps that up. On to staff reports now. The first was the Employment Services transformation, and I guess Marlene, that's you, or Heidi?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Council, and thank you very much for the opportunity to table this report this evening in order to meet a very tight timeline by the province. The Ministry of Colleges, Training and Universities and the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services have announced the next phase of the transformation and integration of employment services in Ontario. In the new system, employment services for social assistance recipients that are currently being delivered by Ontario Works will be integrated with the programs and services delivered by Employment Ontario. The service delivery has also been regionalized across the province within 15 economic regions. Haldimand and Norfolk counties are part of the Hamilton-Niagara Peninsula Economic Region, with the other consolidated municipal services managers of Brantford, Hamilton, and Niagara. One service system manager will be selected for each region using a public procurement process. Municipalities, not-for-profit organizations, and private for-profit organizations are eligible to bid to become the employment service system manager. The transition to the new employment services will begin this fall in 3 prototype economic regions, with implementation beginning April 1st, 2020. Full rollout across the province will take place in 2022. The Hamilton-Niagara Peninsula has been selected as one of the prototype regions. The purpose of this staff report is to obtain council direction to respond to the province's request for qualifications for the role of service system manager. Council will see in the staff report that there are outstanding questions to be answered about the scope of the role and the level of funding. However, staff would like to remain in the process at this stage in order to ensure that the needs and perspectives of our rural community are represented, and so that we retain the option of participating in a future call for proposals as part of a partnership with the other municipalities in our economic region. The timeline for this process is very tight. The RFQ deadline is July 23rd, and the ministry has indicated that they will be selecting service system managers for the prototype regions by the fall. For this reason, staff have brought this report directly to Norfolk Council as the CMSM and have consulted with senior staff in Haldimand County, whose comments are included in the report. With that, I'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from councillors? The the recommendation is that staff report HSS 19-38 Employment Services Transformation be received as information, and the council direct the General Manager of Health and Social Services to respond to the Province of Ontario's request for qualifications only for the role of Service System Manager for Employment Services within the Hamilton-Niagara Peninsula Economic Region, and further that should Norfolk County be successful in the request for qualification process, council delegate the authority to continue on to the call for proposals phase of the procurement to the General Manager, Health and Social Services, subsequent to consultation with Haldimand County staff. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. I just have a question on that, if that's okay. like, is there anticipated to be a revenue coming in then from this? Or are we accepting a service that is going to end up costing us down the road?
So, Madam Mayor, through you, the budget allocation that is included in the RFQ for the entire Hamilton Niagara Peninsula is $64.9 million. Two of the questions that have been submitted to the province through my understanding is that the questions that we are going to be hearing about are, what is the cost of admin allocation for the service system manager to deliver the program or administer the program? And secondly, would there be a municipal contribution? Certainly those answers, that information would be crucial to a decision whether or not to move forward, because as staff, we would not want this to have an economic impact on the county.
So should that not come back to council then? Or is this anticipated during the summer break? Is that the problem?
Madam Mayor, that is exactly the issue, that we are expecting that the outcome of the RFQ will be released, and the deadline to submit the call for proposal will be before council comes back for summer recess, because the province is anticipating announcing the successful service system managers the end of August.
So I guess part of my challenge with this right now is part of that RFQ process, they are also looking for private vendors as well, are they not?
That's correct.
So to me, not only should it not be costing us money, we should actually be bringing in some money. Otherwise, why would we take on additional responsibility when it might fall better to somebody like Fanshawe to operate this? So I would hope that that weighs heavily in the decision.
Madam Mayor, we completely understand that.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. I need a motion we'll get this out of the way, to move past the hour of 9 p.m. to complete the business at hand. Councillor Rabbits, or Taylor, Councillor Huffman, all those in favor? Okay. I need them all, though. It has to be everybody. There we go. Carried. Can we do from 9 to 10 and not midnight again? Next is the award of the contract for King Street reconstruction in Delhi. I guess, Mr. Baird, that's you?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Good evening, Council. Our report before you tonight deals with the tendered bids that we've received for the King Street reconstruction in Delhi. There's a map included on page 167 that shows the project limits. This is a piece of what we call connecting link. It's a roadway that is considered part of the provincial highway network. King Street is part of Highway 3 as it traverses Delhi, and as such, it's eligible for connecting link funding. We have a number of connecting links in Simcoe and through Delhi and north of Simcoe. And we take advantage of any funding opportunities from the Ministry of Transportation. This project was earmarked for about $1.25 million in grants from the province. However, that was based on some original estimates. So that now that we've received competitive bids that are shown on page 162, the prices are considerably higher than the original placeholder estimate in our capital budget. And Mr. Johnson and his staff have made some recommendations on where to fund some of the shortfall, in addition to pursuing actual costs of the road construction grant with the ministry. So we'll definitely be pursuing that. But I think a question or two that begs to be asked is why this was particularly higher than we had anticipated. And there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, downtown work within a downtown area, which is similar to Port Dover and Simcoe and other urban communities, is much more costly. The ability to keep businesses open and traffic flowing does require much more detouring and additional efforts to keep sidewalks passable for pedestrians and for commerce. There's extensive detouring for both eastbound and westbound using Church Street and Talbot Road. And also, the condition of the underground infrastructure was far worse than we thought, so it's certainly a good project. It's come at the right time. The only other piece too is it does encompass traffic signals, and there's additional work required with those in terms of signal timing. I know Councillor Columbus has fielded many inquiries from the business community, and we intend to address those. So I'm glad to answer any questions. The recommended bid is from Sierra Infrastructure Incorporated. It is the lowest bid, and we do have additional costs for materials testing and contingency that brings the project up to $3.975 million. And with that, Mayor Chop, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Questions from councillors? I appreciate all those kind of reasonings as to why it's more expensive to do work in town, but this isn't the first time that we've done work, and it's just every week it seems to be that we're way under budgeted amounts. A couple weeks ago, it was just $500,000 for East Street in Port Dover for the extension of the water transmission line. At some point, this council can't just approve everything that's over budget, over budget, over budget. It's just, there has to be a limit here. And if we can't, like I mentioned earlier, if there's certain projects that are taking priority because they're in a critical state, then there's certain projects that we're going to have to look at not doing. And I'm just kind of waiting for some project to come forward that the recommendation is to delay it because there isn't funding.
Mayor Chop, that's an excellent observation. In fact, we are looking at part of the challenge has been, and again, it's a lot of little things that have contributed to this, in my opinion. One of the major challenges, and you've hit it right on the head, is having a late approval for capital budget means we're out of the gate later than usual. Normally we would have tenders issued back during the winter. We're finding constructors now not bidding. As an example, we had 28 companies pick up bids, but only 4 that submitted prices. One more recent one, and it's in Ward 6, Councillor Martin's area, Don John, is we received only 1 bid, and it was almost 3 times the budget. And that's exactly what we intend to do, is after the summer recess, is to bring that recommendation back that we cancel that contract and re-tender it through the winter months so that we can get significantly better pricing. And that's what we experienced and observed with Holden Avenue, which of course is proceeding this year. We did recommend deferring that, and there was another project in Simcoe near the high school. So that's exactly what we have to do. And we're also looking at other projects. One in particular is the Highway 24 paving that will go from the south end of Simcoe all the way to the Turkey Point Road. It's a major extension. It's about 18 kilometers of pavement. We are recommending narrowing the shoulders from 1.5 to 1 meter on each side. That will effectively save us $250,000 that we can use to directly offset some of these overages. And Mr. Johnson and I have spoken at length about now that we've got a good number of our capital projects issued, tendered, and approved, we've got some savings in some areas, and we'll have a much better idea because council, I fully agree, we need to stay within what's approved, but we also want to make sure that we have a good effective plan. And getting an early start, which we fully intend to this October with the capital budget approval, I'm confident we can get back on track and start to see more bids of a more competitive nature. So
I think we still have 6 months. I think we need to get back on track this year into what's a priority and what's not. And the other piece about the number of companies that have applied, I've gone back and I've looked at sort of historical records, and it's kind of been the trend that this is all we've been getting for years. So I don't know that it's necessarily associated with the capital budget. One thing I will point out, though, and this is one of the signs of a good RFP, is when all your bids are very close, and these are over $1 million apart. So I'm just curious, who's writing the RFPs?
The RFPs, Mayor Chop, are developed with our purchasing staff, and the scope of the jobs, which is generally, the details, the limits and quantities and so on, are calculated by our engineering staff, and they're reviewed and put out. We're confident in what we're asking, but we do have limited number of bidders later in the season, and we just don't have the ability to get projects finished. I'll cite one example where we're paving in December. The asphalt plants close mid-November, and it makes it very difficult to get a final lift of asphalt on the roadways. So maybe it entails a different approach. Some of my staff are suggesting that we just stay with the base course asphalt, and then the second year after do the final lift. as ways to maybe work within the time constraints. So there's a lot of little things that are working against us. And I think you mentioned even this evening about looking at all our priorities, all our capital projects, and really making sure, are we doing the right ones, when are we doing them, and how are we doing them? And we're open and willing to do any of that because we clearly, these costs, we have to contain them.
But this one you deem a necessity now?
Based on the bids that we see, and I agree, there is quite a spread, 1.1 million between the highest and lowest, but the next lowest bid is right in there. And again, some of these other factors have made quite clear when we see the cost breakdowns, the provisions that are made for a late season. This project.
But if it's because of a late season, and it's 1.9 million over budget, would it not be prudent to wait then?
The only problem with this, Mayor, is we do have, right now as it sits, about 31% of the project is funded through the MTO, and we intend to fully pursue more funding. You'd hate to leave that, even as it stands, 1.25 million on the table and have that perhaps forfeited and not available for next year. So I think that's really important to make this a priority and maybe look at some of our other projects coming up this year, maybe subject to deferral. But.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I know I've mentioned this before, but we do live in Canada, right? We only got 2 seasons. We got winter and we got road construction season. Does it make perfect sense in my mind that the construction companies have their summer's work booked? So if we're going to be issuing tenders in July to do work, they've already got their whole job filled. So you know what? I'll do your work for you, but I'm going to double the price. If I make enough money, I'll do it. So I think we are on that, and I think we talked about that with the new budget committee, to move up that capital budget so that it's done early in the fall so that we can have our staff preparing the tender. So on January 1st, they go out the door and get them in the hands of the construction companies before they've got their whole season booked. So, I just said this a little while ago, it's only an extra 1.9 million. What the hell? The deficit's in the road construction reserve is 28 million in the hole anyway. What's a bit more? But this can't keep happening. But we've just heard all the arguments about why it should continue and get this project done. It needs it. We can still tap into some provincial dollars. Maybe we can get a bit more to cover that shortfall of 1.9 million in the budget, and it won't feel quite as bad. But we got to change how we do things.
Just one quick question. Was the grant from the money from the MTO, was that included in the budget, or is that going to help that 1.9?
The project, as we define when the project should come up in the schedule, we don't know if there's connecting link funding available. The opportunity arose, so we fast-tracked it and made application.
So it wasn't
successful.
included in the budget then?
No, that's right. But it is shown as a breakdown as an offsetting revenue on the total.
Okay. Councillor Columbus and then Councillor Huffman, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This rebuilding of King Street project has been in the discussion by the Delhi BIA and the Chamber of Commerce, Delhi Chamber of Commerce, for the last few years. They've met with the Valley Engineering, who's looking after some of the work here, and all the county staff. This is a very, very busy highway. It gets torn up right around the bend by the Kentucky Fried Chicken each year. A lot of patchwork going on. It's dangerous. There's 10 to 13,000 vehicles a day travel this road through Delhi. So the business people there are quite anxious to get it done. Right now, the MTO, they've got $1.25 million for us, and I think it's time that we voted in support of this construction.
Councillor
Thank you.
Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to Mr. Baird. And it's funny that Councillor Columbus brought up the Kentucky Fried Chicken, because that was where I had to get my bearings as to exactly where we were here in Delhi. As a visitor to Delhi frequently, I really struggle navigating that little bend and the median and getting into the little Belgian and the whole thing. Is there any plan for that to be remedied at all? Because that just does not make any sense to me, and it appears to be very dangerous as well, with the transports coming around and the lights and the swimming pool road, and And now with, we've got some of the breweries out there and just with the traffic. So I would like to see that looked at somehow.
Mayor Chop, that's absolutely within the scope limits. So we'll look at the radiuses and the line painting and how the lanes, all the dimensions that work together. So it will be captured for sure. Okay. It is tricky for sure.
Okay, I have a mover for the staff recommendation as presented by Councillor Michelli and seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Next report is the arenas report, I believe. The arena fee report, Mr. Gridlin.
Through the mayor, I believe James Johnson will be leading the discussion, or Kathy, as it is a finance report.
Thank you, Mayor Chop and members of council. The report before you tonight, it's been prepared to provide council with additional information, financial information, and usage information as requested for all Norfolk County arenas. Community services and financial services have worked closely together, so I'm only going to touch on a few items. After that, I'll probably pass it off to Mr. Cridlin. So just quickly to outline it, back in December, staff presented the proposed 2019 user fees. And at that time, we had recommended an annual CPI for arena rental rates, and council passed the proposed 2019 rates with the exception of the ice rental rates and planning fees. These fees, again, as I mentioned, just included a CPI rate. So at that point, council was very much interested in receiving more information and details from staff, so they requested us to bring back a subsequent report. In doing so, staff reviewed it at that time and felt we hadn't reviewed user fees since the inception of Norfolk County, so we did a comprehensive review of the user fees. And we used based on our user fee policy. And at that time we prepared, and with that review, we recommended some subsidization rates. We brought that back to council in March, recommending that the majority of the ice rental fees remain at 2018 levels, with the exception of the junior and intermediate groups, that their fee would also be equal to the non-prime rate. I believe that brought that down from $136 an hour to $112 an hour. We also, in that recommendation, shinny, hockey, and adult skates were also proposed to be reduced. So at that time, council reviewed that report, and we worked together to come back with another request and requesting more details, more information. So this report provides that information that council's requested. It's included in the attachments. I just like to say I apologize for attachment A. One of the requests was to have the arena and the location of the arena. They're all, I think, located in Port Dover, but the names. But if you'd like a revised report, we can email that out to you. Sorry? In addition, we've, under Schedule D, we've provided all the information that we used to actually calculate the fees back when we did the comprehensive review. That information wasn't provided at the last report. So attachment D has all that information. So again, at this time, staff is still recommending to leave the rates for the 2019 and 2020 rates at the same, what we recommended back in March. Again, however, council, we realize that council wants us to look at the rates and keep rates lower and the operations of the arena. So council, if they choose, they can request a reduced rate or a higher subsidization rate. That's definitely council's prerogative. And just before I finish, I'd just like to introduce Matt Hilson. Matt Hilson is a financial analyst that worked closely and did a lot of calculations with community services. He's the financial analyst for that area. And with that, I'll pass it on to Mr. Cridlin regarding any of the operations.
Thank you, Kathy. Through the mayor to county council. Yes, I'd start by thanking Kathy, Matt, and James for their input, and all finance staff for their input into this report. They are the number gurus, so when we got looking at this, they had a lot of ability to drill down, get trends, facts, and stuff like that. So definitely a really worthwhile process to go through. I think the two things I would point out to council is on page 8 of 10 of the report, There is, as Kathy had mentioned, we are recommending the 2019 rates to stay as they are, but that does compare to arenas close to Norfolk County, and we picked those because we figured, sometimes you can make a comparison with a facility 20, 30, 100 miles away sort of thing, but based on a municipality of similarity. And we figured here that if we wanted to keep our users, they would look to Norwich, Brant, Halden, and that sort of thing to play hockey. It's still travelable. So I think when you look through that, we are, we're probably mid-pack. The other page I would bring council's attention to is page 5 of 10, about halfway down, potential cost savings. We definitely talk about the All Norfolk Hub if this project is approved and is completed. There is the savings of 15 to 25% of utility costs alone. And again, it seems like quite a spread, but it's really tough. There is a lot of new technology out there for arenas to save energy, and basically the more you spend on the front end of this technology is the more you'll save in the end. So we do mention that. That rolls out to the rest of our arenas, where anything we can do as far as LED lighting, different ice resurfacers, compressor limiters, ice pad temperature systems, all do help reduce the cost of operating costs. And lastly, we do mention, and it is in the recommendation, about bringing a report back on changes to what we call the ice allocation policy. This is, again, a policy that hasn't been looked at or reviewed for a number of years. And one of the biggest things in that ice allocation policy is we presently have 72 hours for a user group to, as long as they're within 72 hours, they contact the county that they can't make their ice or their practice time or their game for certain reasons. We don't charge for that. And in talking to a lot of other municipalities, they have a much bigger window. So if we can get that notice a month ahead, even 2 or 3 weeks ahead, there is quite a large amount of ice. It averages the last 3 years. Low one year was 1,000 hours of ice, and it was as high as 1,200, I believe. So those are ice hours that if we know a month in advance that we can rent some of that. We'll never rent the whole 1,000, but there are groups that are looking for this ice because a lot of it is prime time. We have touched base with the user groups last year when we met with them and talked about this. They were a little apprehensive because it's going to take more planning on their behalf and a few things. So we introduced the idea, and we thought it was important to bring in here and let county council know that one potential cost savings with getting that ice back earlier to re-rent. And I think with that, unless finance has any more comments, I'll turn it over to county council for any questions.
Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. We get exercise at council, eh? Up and down. Question. Not a question, a statement. As a previous hockey parent, as a previous member of the executive, that 72 hours, if we're asking for more from our community groups, I couldn't support that. Most of the associations, it's volunteers, people who are working full-time jobs. It's hard to get a lot of this done. There can be, where a team is eliminated from playoffs and things are booked and stuff. So part of our mandate was wanting to make things more accessible and more affordable for our minor sports groups. So I don't support that. I do know, I see where it comes from. The one question I have is, why do we think that the advertising dollars are down in the arenas and also on the, I'll use the word Zamboni, but I know it's not proper. Why are those dollars down? Have we looked into that? Because it seemed fairly significant to me that there was a drop in those dollars advertising.
Through the Mayor, County Council. Yes, the ice resurfacer, we did lose a major sponsor who was there for years. And that losing that one sponsor is the drop in that. And as far as the rink board advertising, yeah, I think as we get more social media and different ways to advertise, it gets more competitive, and I think it's up to the businesses to decide where their dollars are best to go. However, we have various options within our user fee. If somebody comes in and they take 15 board spaces, it's half price and they get to do, and I believe the sailors do that. So I think that number does fluctuate, but no, staff noticed that too, and the rink resurfacer is an easy answer. The other one just may be the times and the other availabilities of advertising avenues out there.
And one more question. Why does the Waterford, why does Torrey Century Arena not have any really summer rentals?
Through the mayor to county council. I think it goes back to when we kind of our discussions around the lacrosse. The staffing aspect, it was a lot of the groups, Simcoe is open, and that was kind of the hub where these groups would go. And I don't want to answer for all my staff, but I haven't had requests myself to have summer programming in Waterford. Seems everybody does migrate to Talbot, and that's where we try to put folks. But that is something I can ask staff, and I'm sure if there was enough requests there, then it would be like the lacrosse. We would look at entertaining.
Okay. I do remember very clearly with the lacrosse piece, and so I was just wondering if in terms of ball hockey or summer programs or something like that in Waterford, that there's this space, and it's right next door to the green space and the ball diamonds, and, it seems to make pretty good sense to me that we could have some programming there in the summer. I do recall that the lacrosse wasn't really an option for Waterford due to the scoreboard being down so low and possible damage with the lacrosse balls, etc. But I'm just looking at some other, stepping outside the box and looking at some other options, maybe when they're looking at summer programming for next year and being able to offer something in Waterford. So I know people in Waterford would like to stay in Waterford sometimes instead of traveling everywhere.
Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Crittenden, I too had a concern about this revenue dropping. It's about $15,000 over a year, 28.5%. Is something changed there? Did we take one of our employees off of trying to build that program and move them to another area? Or why is it down that much? Or I don't even know, we're halfway through 2019. Is it still trending that way?
Through the mayor to county council. We did have a change of staff members. However, the program itself is still up and running. And unfortunately, I don't know where our trend is yet for 2019, unfortunately.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you do the ice allocation review, is it time to start looking at a major sort of shift on how we do things? Because I think there's certain groups that have always had certain blocks of ice time, and we accommodate them. And isn't it about, like, I notice like salary and wages are almost half of the bills to operate the arenas. Maybe it's time to look at shifting some that we shut down one day a week and take those ice hours and allocate them somewhere else, and try to make it so it is like we used to do the 6 o'clock in the morning practice with the kids, and then there was nobody on the ice till noon for an hour, and then there's nobody on the ice till 4:30, but there's staff in there the whole day. So maybe you just got to cancel some of those, shift them to different times, have those discussions over time with the different user groups. But like this little poking and prodding is not working. So maybe it's time for that more dramatic sort of shift on how we do things there.
Through the chair to county council. No, that is a good point. We do try to use our user groups, as fairly as we can, and you are correct. A lot of them have had certain times that they are, but as time changes, that'll be part of going forward with the ice allocation thing. Is we definitely have to have their input, but you are correct. We will try to entertain till we can, but if it probably is the time to tighten some of that up, and that may be some more savings which will come out of revamping this allocation policy.
Further questions from councillors? When we look at comparing those other, our rates to neighboring municipalities, I know there's a lot of complaints around here with our, our vendors inside. What's the word? The booths, the concession stands, that's the one, not being open. Are those other arenas, I think they're all providing that service. Could that be in part to do with the revenue where, they're more likely to go and advertise? We've had a lot of frustrated customers, I think, with our arenas this year. So I find it strange that we have frustrated customers and yet we're looking at increasing the rates. I also find it frustrating that we've just, are way over budget on so many issues and it's seemingly no big deal, and just one of those projects alone would be enough to subsidize this so that it was affordable for more people to play, and in turn, more people playing would mean more revenues, and so it would actually bring everything in line. Like, to me, that should be a goal of this council, of how do we reduce, like Councillor Van Passen said, what can we do to change how we've been doing things for years at the arenas to make a bold move and reduce the rates, as opposed to just this constant trajectory upwards that is making it impossible. I'd rather see a report come back that says, here's some changes that we can make, some changes to staffing, to shift schedules, which is within our ability in the collective agreement, and see a report that for once says, here's how we're going to reduce rates for everyone, as opposed to increasing them yet again.
Through the mayor, I think the ICE allocation policy, or the process of getting that, will help us, and it is that we do need the users' input, because I'm just a little gun shy to make some rash decisions, because we have to have these folks. So I think through the process of communicating, we can get their ideas, and I think they all would like to see the rates go down, as you speak to, and there is some fear of if rates continue to go up and we continue to lose money in our arenas, that maybe we would close an arena someday. That's not in our mandate. So I think they have a vested interest that I think they would come to the table and be on side, and I think coming forward we have a more of a group community effort on that. But I hear what you're saying.
So we're going into a nice long break, and I have to say, I mean, although, we saw a lot of pushback with how far down the bikes were going to be for Friday the 13th, it was a unique situation where, the Kinsmen and the Board of Trade, I mean, they did get on board, right, because we involved them. And is there a possible way to take over the next month while everybody's off, of maybe inviting some of these user groups in to see if maybe they themselves can think of some ways that we could reduce costs and thereby reduce the rental rates?
Through the mayor, yes, staff, we will plan to meet with the groups this summer and fall. I know where you're going. Our hesitation is, I'm not sure where council's going to go with the rates tonight, because if they're not passed, I guess we've had some users asking us, well, what is our fall rate? And presently we're saying it would be the 2018 rate. So I guess that's I'm not sure if we could have all that information in the ice allocation policy back here by September, because our arenas are open in September, and we're taking ice bookings now. So I think the two can come, but I think my biggest thing, if I'm not messing this up, is we'd like a decision on the rates tonight so the groups can go ahead, and we'll do our best to meet in August and September with these groups.
This came up in our budget deliberations in February, and I don't know. For myself, I thought we were going to see some ways of trying to kind of reduce these rates, but instead it's what was presented to us back in February without any changes. Councillor Hoffman?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to Mr. Cridlin, where is the process at in regards to the tendering for, I say booths, because when you grow up at an arena, it's a booth, concession stands. I know that was something that was in the works. And the second part of my question would be, has the county ever looked at taking that over?
Through the mayor to county council. We, I won't say myself, staff are presently meeting with the users, figure skating and minor hockeys. And we have got a number of these that are interested in taking the concessions over. However, we have to get a little closer, flush out a little more with them on how much they can expect to make. And the other thing that's coming up is how much work it is, because it's okay if it's a minor hockey game, they will be there, but then the figure skating comes in after, or another tournament sort of thing, and that is what we're fleshing out to let them know that's a little bigger job if community groups take this over, because we talked about that at budgets. And the other question about as far as staff taking it over, in the past, Norfolk County did have staff members that did run the concession booths. It will cost a little bit, but it is a guarantee that staff are scheduled and staff will be there for every event that we need to be. So having our own staff does have some benefits as well. So we're right in the process of that now. There's no contract going out, no RFP at this point. We're trying to get a grassroots, if we heard council right, in the budget deliberation to see if any of these local groups are interested.
And I do agree with that. I don't want to be taking any money, that user groups, community groups can use to fundraise. But I do recall when, a number of years ago, when there wasn't anyone running the booth at the Waterford Arena, and we tried to do a makeshift piece. I can't even begin to describe to you. I would have rather coached hockey 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, than try and do this booth thing. And through my travels through hockey and lacrosse and other sports, there is a big trend where I don't think it is actually community groups doing them anymore. I think it is more something that is initiated by the county. And they also try and keep the prices at a reasonable rate. A lot of families may spend a lot of hours in an arena, and you kind of have to eat there sometimes. And it is unfortunate that when you, if it wouldn't have been for the arena booths in Hagersville, I would have starved to death as a child. I had my money in my mitt. But there's also the piece of the health aspect and healthy choices. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at instead of just a stopgap, so that when someone is going, if the arena is open and there is an event going on, you have access to food, drink, water, that type of thing. And I think that would go a long way to pleasing our user groups, our consumers, and I know it would sure please a lot of grandparents who go to the arena and they're there for a number of hours, and they would like to have something to eat as well. So thank you very much.
I thought the contracts were due, Bill, a while ago.
Through the mayor, yes, the contracts are presently up, and we will hopefully have something in place for late September, October.
But the ice rental starts in September.
First part of September practices, that's correct.
Any further questions? Councillor Van Passen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Arenas are something that are going to lose money. It's just a matter of what council feels is an acceptable level of losing money for the benefits you give to people, the users. But, let's put this all in perspective, that last year to run the 6 arenas cost the taxpayers $2,482,200. And the total amount we collected in revenue was just over $1 million. So, we could just about give it to them for free for 1% increase in the taxes, and everybody gets it for free. So we got to find ways to cut down on the expenditures. And, we have to start looking at those different ways of doing things and changing our schedules. And yeah, it's going to take some negotiation with the user groups, but if this is an acceptable level of subsidy for our youth, then we don't have to do anything. But I think we can do better than that. And I think, we're talking about concession booth, the revenue, $7,200 last year. We put it there for convenience, not to make money, because if we expected to make money, then we'd just walk away from it. So, we got to change how we do everything in those arenas, and it's not going to be a wave the magic wand. It's going to change. It's going to be a year of discussion with the groups and trying things and trying to do things differently. But I think we'll get there, but just not by the 1st of September when the season starts. Right?
Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Huffman, and then
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I just quickly wanted to add in addition to what Councillor Van Passen said, is that if we do look at running the booths, I'll have to say concession stands, these provide then jobs for youth in our community, and then that's twofold, and it's just another step in engaging your youth and investing in your community. And I would really like to see something come forward in regards to that. And I do get it. I know it seems it's only July 9th, but I know how quickly that time goes to, you're doing up skates, because a lot of the other centers will rent ice at the rec center and get some of their tryouts started, or do some power skating and that type of thing. So I definitely get the timeline. But it just doesn't, to me, look very good when there's events going on at the arena and people, can't get something to eat or a cup of coffee or a hot chocolate or anything like that. So just customer service.
Councillor Van Passen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I still have some questions on the methodology on calculations for the cost per hour with the arenas, because logic will just not allow me to accept the fact that it costs $75 an hour more to run the arena in the summertime than it does in the wintertime when you're cooling the ice and heating the building at the same time. It just makes no sense, but I'm sure the treasurer and I could have a discussion about that some other day. But I also noticed the capital upgrades to the arenas over the last 3 years. 3 years ago, it was, the total for all the arenas was $699,000. 2 years ago, it was $368,000. A year ago, it was $376,000. And now we got a new council, and we luckily get to deal with $2.02 million, $2.08 the next year, $2.21 million the next year. Is that just like we just caught the bad time for the arena fixing, or are they punishing us for some reason here?
Through the chair to county council. Yeah, I'm having a tough time finding, I guess it's attachment E here. Again, with a capital budget, a lot of these items have been pushed ahead with, I believe, the two Simcoe facilities with the hub. Some of the spending was booted down the road for future years till we knew what was happening. So that does happen with a capital budget in this case, but you are correct. Capital budgets are a forecast, and that is something staff look at each fall. And if the numbers are loaded that much in certain years, some of that will have to be pushed back, or the priorities will be done. So I think it's a combination of both. I don't think we're picking on you. It's just as budgets come along, some of this stuff does get moved back, and it does get a backlog at some point, and the work has to be done.
Are there any fees over and above those fees for the users of the arenas that aren't included in the user fees? Mandatory fees?
Through the mayor, there would be insurance fees for some groups, and I'm just looking at finance if I'm understanding. The user fee gets you in.
You already hit it on the head.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
insurance fees.
Yeah, I think that's
So
about
the
only-
insurance fees from Norfolk County have been a mandatory fee, have they not?
That is correct, the last couple of years.
And I'm just wondering where we are at with an investigation. I had asked about this actually sort of back in February, I think, because many people actually have insurance through their own providers. And in fact, we're imposing a mandatory fee on people that we should not be imposing because they can carry their own insurance. And if it is a mandatory fee that we are imposing, I believe incorrectly, then why are we not including that in the cost of the user fee?
Through
I think I might have been involved a bit with this
it's not
because there was a
mandatory.
personal information request that we were dealing with, and my understanding is that they're external insurance providers. This is not a fee that they're paying. They're getting their own insurance from a private insurer. It's not something that the county's involved with. We're just making sure they have insurance.
No, Norfolk County was specifically charging for insurance with Cowan.
I think I can clarify that. Years ago, we used to ask for a check mark. Do you have insurance? Yes. And as liabilities, some groups didn't. So a group can get their own private insurance, and if they do not have their own private insurance or choose not to, they can get it from Norfolk County. We do not in my understanding, make any money on it. It is through Cowan's Insurance. We are the middlemen that sign them up. Their fees then go to Cowan's, and we're in the middle, but that way they are covered.
So you say a group, but also an individual.
Yes, that's correct.
So I just want to be clear then, we have agreement across staff that no individual is required, if they are able to provide their own insurance, to purchase Norfolk County's, or to purchase Cowan Insurance through Norfolk County. There is no obligation on the part of any individual to do so.
That is correct. Insurance is required. If they can get it third party on their own, that is fine. If they can't, we offer the Cowan's program.
And you don't recall that ever being in recent times the case?
No, not where we would ask for,
Demand.
that they have demand to go with our insurance if they have private.
Okay. Anyone else? Does somebody like to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Some- Somebody like to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councillor Geisens, and seconded by Councillor Columbus. Any further discussion on the matter? Councillor Martin, Councillor Van Passen, I think Councillor Michelle, you guys.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Just to be clear, if we're passing this recommendation tonight, then it is understood that we are going to, at a later date, have information or a discussion brought forward about revamping the entire system, whether it's going to be fully subsidized or there are a completely different way of operating. I don't want to defer on this. I want to get an answer, but I'm not really happy with the way it sits.
Through the mayor to Councillor Martin, if you accept this, these rates will be in for the 2019 season. As far as the only thing that staff are bringing back will be a report on ICE allocation policy, which may change the way we do business, and also concession stands we'll be looking at, but it will depend on what we bring back, whether these rates will change. I mean, like it was said earlier, council has the decision to change those rates, to subsidize more, to subsidize less. The ICE allocation policy will do some refining of the way we operate, but I don't think I can say that it will totally change the fees that we charge.
I know we're in debate, but would council do me the pleasure of just asking a question? I'm wondering, would there be any possibility of just doing this the problem is it always gets lost. Like the season ends and then we're in the summertime and nobody's thinking about the arenas, and then of course, it comes forward for a new rate. Would it be possible to approve it for just the remainder of 2019 with the stipulation that the rates will not increase beyond that level, but that we will work to reduce them in the second half?
Through the mayor, I mean, that is an option council has. I think what staff would prefer, if these rates were the fall of 2019 and the spring of 2020, then we have the break in the summertime. With that said, there is summer ice.
But we had the break this year and it didn't change anything.
Well, we were still, I think this is the third report to come forward, so the rates were held at that level until we got to this point tonight. So all I'm saying is next April would be a better, a more logical dividing point if you're going to investigate rates in the future. And I think the users would appreciate that as well, because then they know what their costs are for the fall in the spring. And then most of them, you are correct, do not play hockey in the summer, and they'd be ready. We'd have to straighten up by the fall.
Again, I mean, the idea would be that it would not be over this 2019 rate. It would be that it would be potentially less for them. So I don't think that would harm them in any way. And it just keeps us motivated about thinking about hockey during hockey season, because we did keep asking for a report to come, and we obviously have made it clear that we were trying to reduce costs in this area. And in 3 reports, we just keep getting the same numbers 3 times. And I'm just wondering, while hockey's ongoing, if these user groups might be engaged through the fall to come forward and provide some ideas, as opposed to leaving it again to next summer and then hockey becomes kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Again, that's council's, if that's council's directive, the resolution could be worded. I think they will like the idea that it will not be more than what this is. That is an option, but I think staff would still prefer the end of April. You get the season through and look at this then.
Okay, so the motion as it stands was moved by Councillor Geisens and seconded by, Councillor Columbus. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And it's carried. Next report is the revised encroachment policy.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. So just to begin very generally, encroachments are something we generally don't like because they're people occupying our land illegally. So there's always some liability associated with it, especially if it's on a roadway. And we also don't get any property taxation back. So it's always a lose proposition for a municipality. But within this revised encroachment policy, we're looking to try to separate the minor encroachments from the major ones. The process for a major encroachment can often take upwards of a year, and a lot of that's not related to my staff's work. We do the review with other county departments and get it done fairly quickly and get a report before council and get the bylaw. But oftentimes when external lawyers have a bylaw in their hand, they kind of lose the urgency to get that registered on title. So that last stage, sometimes we have to follow up with the external lawyers 3-4 times in order to get them to actually finalize the encroachment. This gives us the option to say, hey, there are things that are minor encroachments and we can really expedite these, and myself in the discussion with the general manager of Public Works can really determine, hey, that's a gutter overhanging the municipal right-of-way by a foot. Do we really need to go through this laborious, long process of registering on title, or can we streamline this? So I see this as an option to really improve the services that we're providing, while at the same time still upholding that we don't want encroachments everywhere throughout the county. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Just wondering on item number 5, focus upon ensuring appropriate insurance coverage is provided, indemnifying the county. So for a minor encroachment, for an awning or shrub, somebody now is going to have to go and get additional insurance, a specific clause to indemnify the county because their shrub is sticking onto county property and has for the last 20 years?
Through you, Mayor, shrubs and vegetation, I think, are exempt from that, but you could have it with an awning specifically if it's like overhanging a sidewalk or something, because you could have icicles fall down on people. But it relates more to if it's on the road allowance. Those ones are a bit more dangerous in the specific positioning of it, but we wouldn't necessarily require insurance, and oftentimes it isn't very hard for people to get the additional $2 million insurance. It usually takes a day, and it would cost them something like maybe $10 a year type thing. So it isn't a huge addition to a policy to get that little encroached portion covered often.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have those circled on page 250 that the owner shall provide proof of insurance policy to the council on an annual basis. Does anybody ever check on that, or?
You hit the nail on the head. That's the next stage of this process is trying to make sure that we're following up with people on an annual basis to get the insurance. A lot of different types of encroachments we do, but generally we get it, and usually it remains on a policy once a homeowner puts it on until they sell the property. But yeah, we do have found a lot of instances where people have sold the property 2 or 3 times and the new owner hasn't brought in that appropriated insurance.
And by the way, I'm still waiting for my copy of the county's insurance for the fire hydrant that you have in my place. It's 7-8 months overdue now, so I expect it in the mail soon. Trevor, on page 2 of the report, that's page 242, near the bottom there, that your experience that after council approves a bylaw, external solicitors assign low priority to the final steps and they don't get it done. Could I suggest that we steal a line from the planning reports and, give them 6 months or give them 3 months, and after such time, your consent will lapse. So if you don't get it done, you lose it, you got to reapply, and that'll prod them a little bit.
Through you, Mayor, we could do that, but I try not to make the residents too angry, because the reality is that a lot of the fees aren't our fees. So you pay a surveyor and then a lawyer, and sometimes these things can get thousands of dollars, and then to have it lapse because they missed the 6 months, they called me up angry.
Any further questions? Somebody wish to move the staff recommendation? Or propose an alternative? Councilor Columbus? Seconded by? Councilor Taylor? Further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. So encroachment policy. Okay, the next one was the request for preparation of information and documentation over the summer recess. And that was from myself. So perhaps, Councilor Martin, maybe I'll pass the chair over to you and I'll just make a motion.
Go ahead.
So I would just, there's a number of items over the break that I think we've been asking for some time, and there's a lot of stuff with our budget that's starting to concern me deeply every week. It's just, we need to get a handle on things, and we're well past the 6-month mark here. So the first is that I'd like to move that council be provided with a variance report on operating and capital budgets showing both budgeted amounts and actuals spent to be provided to council on August 27th. Second is that a list of all surplus... 22nd? A list of all surplus lands asset to be provided to council on August 22nd. 3, the status of all legal proceedings against Norfolk County Council, or against Norfolk County, to be provided to council on August 22nd. 4, the total capital projects remaining for the year, and those capital projects that were over budget to be provided to council on August 22nd. We had a previous, whereas council had a previous motion for monthly one fund legacy reports to be emailed to all of council members. We have not been provided this other than one in April, that council be provided with monthly legacy fund reports of the one fund. And finally, a calculation of mileage that is being used. My apologies. I'm going to get Councillor Van Passen to help me with this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there was a calculation on where the balance point is to having employees driving their own vehicles and paying a mileage as opposed to providing a vehicle to them. Because we learned recently that there's some of our employees that are constantly driving their cars for entire days to do their jobs, and there might be a better way to look at that.
That's all. On August 22nd.
Through you, Mayor. I think on the variance report on the capital, I think August 22nd is good. When I've talked to staff about the operating, I don't think that's realistic to bring it back in the 22nd. I think it's better that we provide some good information, and they would need at least till mid-September, third week of September on the operating side. On the capital, we could meet the August 22nd date. But it's better to have correct information than, information that isn't that accurate.
I guess my problem, Mr. Schlang, is this is something that was well known through the entire campaign period, a frustration that Norfolk County Council has never been provided with a variance report. The former mayor, in fact, made statements that it was going to be in the spring of 2019 that they were going to be providing one. I was told when I also started that I could expect one by summer, and yet here we are, and now we're pushed back into the fall. And I just feel that, what does mid-September mean? Does an additional 2 weeks? Can we do it for the first meeting in September? There needs to be a date here that there is an expectation that this is provided. It's not that it's something that's being asked for out of the blue. I mean, it's been well known for even before this council started, since the election on October 22nd, that this was a main focus of mine. And you've seen we've been running a deficit every single year. I think we've run a surplus twice in the last, 10 years, 12 years? And if we leave this to October, how do we get our budget in line by January?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not saying October, but, mid-September for sure. Because, it's not just a matter of finance pushing a button and you get a variance report.
It should be.
requires the entire, when systems are in place and processes are in place and there's a culture in the organization in place, but it's not that simple just to punch out that information. And even in municipalities where we provide really good variance reports, there's still a lot of timing issues and timing matters that, so I think on the operating, I see the pain of all of council. I've seen the deficits. We want to maybe do a fairly good job for you. So I'm saying, third week of September is what I've heard from the staff.
Okay, so how do we get our budget in line then after the third week of September?
Through you, Mayor, I've been through this before, but if we start to see some issues that we're running a deficit again, we would, come to council with some suggestions to stop doing things, maybe some, freezes, or deferments, but usually by September, you could make some things happen by the end of the year. But in capital, the team did tell us that August 22nd would be possible.
I appreciate Mr. Schlang's comments, but my motion's going to stand as it is for that piece.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. We're looking for a seconder. Councillor Michele. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin. Just wondering if, friendly amendment, if it's necessary to have the current mileage policy included in that mileage calculation, just to see it side by side, so we have that baseline there.
Mayor Chop.
Fantastic idea.
Fantastic idea. Further discussion on the motion? Okay, move to a vote. Those in... Seeing none, we will move to a vote. Those in favor? And that is carried.
Okay, moving on to the next item is a verbal update for Hastings Drive. I guess that's to you, Harry.
Through you, I've sort of done some follow-up over this has been a 10-year issue, as I understand. But Public Works will be providing a report in September on next steps. What we're recommending is that a workshop with a coastal engineer come in as well, accompanying that report, but more of a workshop, so there could be more interactive discussion on what the possibilities could be to do this properly. So again, we're talking about late September for a report back on next steps.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to our CAO. A big part of the conversation last week was that, one, potentially the permit would run out. And that was a concern for residents. And two, that there was a lot of information kind of pending and not clear with regards to the MNR. I did send Jason an email and speak with him after council about bringing that documentation to council. He said he would do so. Is there documentation that we can share with council with regards to the MNR? Because through the deputations we heard that they were able to just simply provide drawings for the work to the MNR, and it was a very easy process for those residents to do that. And I'm just wondering why, from the county's perspective, now we have to go and meet with additional engineers and schedule meetings in September when these residents were just able to sketch something up that was suitable. can we share documentation or get additional details on that?
Mayor Chop, if I could, on behalf of Mr. Schlang. Councillor, the permits that were drawn right now are through the Conservation Authority, and they are for a certain time frame. We should not worry about them lapsing. That process to get those permits through the LPRCA is not onerous. However, because of the extensive nature, and just maybe for context, on Hastings Drive there are 40 dwellings or cottages. There's 66 vacant private lots, and there's 49 vacant county-owned lots. So all in all, the county's interests are 31% of all of those existing lots on Hastings. Because it's that's obviously 1/3 of the work. For residents that have gone out previously and got a permit from the CA to do some rubble or some shape or form of shoreline protection, it can be very straightforward, very limited. But because this is essentially 1/3 the length of Hastings Drive, the MNRF is requiring considerably more engineering and than just merely placing rubble and repairing the road. There's also issues too related to species at risk, and so we have to take all of these things into consideration. So as Mr. Schlang has indicated, we'd like to provide council with a workshop type format for about 15-20 minutes to explain the processes and how they're affecting Hastings. That'll buy us a little bit more time through the summer. The lake levels, as Councilor Michelle is well aware, are up 80 centimeters above the normal. I've been provided pictures of people canoeing in their backyards in Long Point. It's quite dramatic. We've never seen it quite like this. So even if we were ready to go right now, we simply could not proceed with the shoreline work or road work. We continue to do our best to keep the road open. But the purpose of that report is to say, here's what we need to do, and here's an action plan to move it forward. Because people are frustrated, and council is frustrated, and it's something that it's Mother Nature at work. And so anyway, we think that would be helpful, and we'll continue to work through the summer, and we'll provide answers for you. Just again, we want to show how things are going to lay out accordingly.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. It just dawned on me. One final question that we couldn't answer last week was why the county hadn't started anything yet. So prior to the lake levels, are you able to share details with us on that?
Through the mayor, yes, absolutely, Councillor Martin. Following the prior staff report, we engaged a company to help us through the permitting process with the CA, and it was through that process that we found out that we could not get the permits to do the work we needed to do that would satisfy the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So that's where we're at this point. There was a suggestion, there was a report that was submitted back in, see if I've got the note here, back in December 12th, 2017, and in that report there was suggestions there about coming up with some sort of erosion management plan. That motion was defeated, and instead council approved a motion to direct staff. That was to originally to go to the CA for emergency shoreline protection. And the suggestion there was we do have at some of our roads yards a significant quantity of rubble, riprap, concrete that would be considered appropriate for use of shoreline protection. So we weren't looking at really a lot of cost for the material, just really hauling it and placing it, but placing it in accordance with a plan. The last thing we'd want to do is create, force the problem downstream, if you will, down current, and start to impact the rest of Long Point. As you can imagine, one problem creates one solution might create another problem. So that's why we need to take, a good look at how we're doing things. Because again, this is an active process that we need to have a proper plan in place.
Councillor Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know if this question is better to Mr. Baird or Mr. Schlang, but I'm a little bit curious about some of the suggestions that the deputations made for some of the what I think might be more of the minor improvements we could make. In particular, and just thinking of these two, the suggestion that proper signage be put up to alert motorists of the flooding right across on the causeway where Hastings Drive meets Erie Avenue, and also that some kind of perhaps a review of the trenching that was put in there that actually may actually have contributed to more flooding rather than less flooding in that area. So I'm just kind of curious if we can kind of look at that a little bit. So I'm getting that Mr. Baird's going to answer that. Thank you.
Sure. Through Mayor Chop, Councillor, that particular stretch is the lowest location on Long Point. It's approximately, the way the water levels are as they were this morning, it's about 16 centimeters or almost 6 inches the roadway below the lake level. That's why we're getting that big pond across there. And that was a suggestion or the assertion that the drainage work that we did as part of the Erie Boulevard reconstruction paving, that we'd actually contributed to letting more lake water in or from the bay side, but that's certainly not the case. And again, as soon as those lake levels recede, as we hope they will, and there's no wind-driven waves, we can see the road clear up. But it is a concern for us because, especially on that curve, for visitors, and we know we get lots of them that certainly aren't anticipating conditions quite like that. This isn't a puddle. This is a significant amount of water, as you know.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess, Mr. Baird, we could then, can we put up some signage, though, that will alert motorists about that? We saw in the deputation some pictures of traffic going both ways or even two going the same way, and people's windshields being so totally covered that there was risk of accident because they couldn't see. So maybe we can at least do something in that range so that there'll be a little bit more safety and precaution. Please.
Mayor Chop, I'd be pleased to look into that tomorrow.
It's strange. I was just down there and there was a sign on the road.
Madam Mayor, I guess then we are getting conflicting stories. I received information yesterday that that there is significant flooding over there and
along the county stretch at the far end, but the road closure sign, when they've put it, has been actually much further ahead than that. So they've chosen to drive around the sign and then complain that there isn't signage.
Oh,
I think
no,
I might even
Madam
have a
Mayor,
picture.
I'm sorry, I'm not speaking about actual Hastings Drive. I'm speaking about the curve that goes around Erie.
Oh, I see.
That's flooded, and that's where the danger is.
So what is your suggestion of telling them out on Hastings Drive then that, we've had a permit in place for 2 years. There was a motion from council to do these repairs. I mean, quite frankly, there was a motion that was ratified by council that the county sell the lots that we had, which would have allowed the new owners then to do shoreline protection along there. And yet we haven't done it. And again, we're putting it off now.
Mayor Chop, I'm not clear. You said that the county was going to sell our private lands?
We had a motion as well from the previous council. I raised it back some time ago. I could certainly find it, or Andy could. That was directing council to declare those lands as surplus and dispose of them, but it never took place.
I'm not aware of that, but we could certainly look into it. I know there were 2 lots that came up through tax sale, and the county council authorized to submit bids in so that we could take them back into the public realm as a way of controlling further development, just diminishing that. But
that's it. I think it's our way of controlling, and I don't think that that's within our right if council had ratified a decision to do that. I don't want to get into names, but I was particularly concerned when somebody at one point posted on the Simcoe Reformer that in terms of the road closures on Hastings, and somebody basically said, a few years back, and they obtained permissions to do some shoreline protection and so on, that the county had said that they too had their permits in place, in which we did, I believe, right, a couple years ago. And then somebody replied on this and said, you need to face the facts. There's going to be no building of anything on Hastings Drive. There are members of county staff and our roads department that supported that comment. And that concerns me, given the history of Hastings Drive, that there is a political issue here that I just want to ensure that that's not going to cloud what's actually happening on Hastings, because it is a road. There are taxpayers out there with properties, and it is incumbent upon us to maintain it, and we haven't been maintaining it. And I think we all know that there's more to the Hastings Drive story. And so I just want to ensure that we get moving forward with this without any further delay and without any opinions clouding what's actually happening, and that it's the direction of council and the previous council that that road be repaired.
Chop, that's exactly what we're doing. I can't control what my staff
I
choose
just,
to support
but I'm
on
just, but we
social
all know
media.
in Norfolk County that, I'm not saying that there's issues within all over. I mean, it's probably the most contentious issue that we face, right? And so, I just want to point out that it is council's direction and council's decision and the previous councils that the road shoreline protection be done along county properties, and we get moving.
Our CAO and myself have given you that commitment,
Okay.
and you'll have that information in September.
Super. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you're right that it is county property, it has to be fixed, but I can show you bridges in Ward 6 that have been closed for 10 years. The money is in the budget and nothing has been done on them. There's roads that have been closed for 2 years in Ward 6 that we're still waiting to get fixed. Just because we have a very vocal group down in Hastings and we have the high record levels of water and a few bad storms, does that automatically get to bump it to the front of the line when we have other issues as well? So I know there is a situation there. It needs to be addressed, but it's not the only one that we have in Norfolk County.
Is there just, rather than an expensive fix with having to do any sheet piling or anything along there, like, is there something that could be, I mean, just being down there and looking at it, is there something that's maybe less of an aggressive, costly measure to do sort of a temporary repair?
Madam Mayor, I'm not a coastal engineer, and I would not recommend anything unless a professional provides that. I think there's going to be a couple of options. I don't know if sheet piling or hardening of that shoreline is in order as opposed to something that might mitigate the wave uprush through placement of concrete and things like that. That's what we need a professional to tell us, and then we can cost it out and put together a plan and get on with it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, that's the end of that then. Next is a motion that bylaws 2019-58, bylaws 2019-59, bylaws 2019-67 to bylaw 2019-79, inclusive, bylaws 41Z 2019 to bylaw 43Z 2019 inclusive, bylaw 47Z 2019 and 48Z 2019, and bylaw 49Z 2019 be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. It's been moved by Councillor Michele and seconded by Councillor Geisens. Oh, sorry, Councillor Michele. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before we go to that process of passing all of these bylaws in a bunch, I wonder if it would be all right if I were to speak to bylaw 2019-77, letter M. It is referring to the appointment of a municipal bylaw enforcement officer, and I don't know if you are able to look. I just want to give council a little bit of perhaps explanation or background here. The bylaw, as you'll see on our agenda package on page 303, indicates that it's a bylaw to hire or designate a county staff person who is the director, the current director of Heritage and the Norfolk Heritage and Culture Committee. And just to give people some background about this, because I don't think council has been informed of this, and the minutes of the Heritage Committee meeting that where this was determined have not been printed and made available to us yet. But we did have a little bit, just for council's information further, we did have a little bit of background to this actually provided by Councillor Huffman earlier, asking about a couple of instances where property owners were or may be in violation of the Heritage Act. And it was brought to light and brought to, I think in some ways, some stark reality that the Heritage Committee, even though they are authorized under the Heritage Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, has very little, has had in the past very little enforcement power. But through some slight changes in the Ontario Heritage Act by the current provincial government very recently, it is now possible for heritage committees to have one of their members be designated as a bylaw enforcement officer to deal specifically with possible Heritage Act violations. So I just wanted to make council aware that this is not just an additional bylaw officer who will be part of the larger bylaw staff that will attend to all bylaw issues. This one will be specifically connected and dedicated to Heritage Act violations. Thanks.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to ask the clerk with bylaw 21972, there was a slight error in there. Has that been corrected?
Yes, sir. It's before me right here. It's correct.
Yes,
Thank you for noting that.
Anything further? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. And next is motion that council move into closed session. Actually, we'll do, sorry, while everybody's here. What's the new word? General announcements. And I don't think we were going around the room anymore, so Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Received communication, I think it was sent to everyone today, that UV disinfection equipment was received at Norview, donated by the Who Did It Club. I do believe staff was trained on how to use it this morning, and that's in operation, so I'd like to extend my thanks and appreciation to the Who Did It Club, and also like to say I can't wait until the barbecues this summer. Also, have a great recess.
Councillor Huffman.
Thank you. First off, I want to, big congratulations to Art with Heart, Nikki Campbell-Schramm, for receiving the a $24,000 donation from the Maureen Dodd Foundation Legacy. So that is quite a boost to our arts community here in Norfolk County. Now, tomorrow, 4 till 7 p.m., we are having our first annual 50s Day at the Waterford Farmers Market. We will have classic cars. If you have a classic car or a classic tractor, or just a tractor, and you want to show off, please join us. We'll have 50s tunes. We have free root beer floats or free root beer, whichever you may choose. Any vendors who are interested in joining the market, please feel free to join us. So tomorrow, 4 till 7, down by Shadow Lake in Waterford. And again, enjoy your summer recess.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to remind everyone of the Ram Rodeo at Timmerman's Ranch in the big city of Nixon, July 20th and 21st. And on your way home, stop in New Limburg for a beer. It's a great place to be. July 21st, we also have the North Shore Challenge going on at the Turkey Point Beach. And a little later on in August 7th to the 11th, the Turkey Point Summerfest will be go on. So come on down to Ward 4 and enjoy yourself now that you're all bored. So.
My apologies, I forgot. July 20th in Waterford, again, we will be hosting the Dragon Boat Races. It's the fourth or fifth. I've done it every year, so I should remember. I believe there's 18 boats that are registered. If you have never been, it's an amazing event. We have teams from Toronto and Hamilton and local groups, and it's a lot of fun. It raises money for Run for the Cure and for the oh, my mind just went blank. Can you remember it, Marlene? It's for this support group for families in Norfolk County who have an individual who's dealing with cancer. And they provide funds directly to the families to help out with some of the day-to-day amenities that families struggle with when they're going through that difficult time. But the day is a blast, and there's music, there's beer gardens with local craft beers, and I encourage you to come out and pop by and take a visit.
Councilor Shelley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to refer to the council information package, memo in there. I just want to comment on that there has been some great efforts and communication between the Long Point Region Conservation Authority and the County Building Department, streamlining the process for getting permits and coordinating their efforts so that the customer experience is going to be much better, and hopefully going forward there will be less frustration in having to deal with those two agencies. They had a very good, I think they would describe it as a lunch and learn on June the 4th, where they discussed the ways that they can coordinate their efforts to make the customer service experience much better. And so I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Rapp? No? Wow. Anyone from staff? No? Okay. Well, I hope you guys all have a great recess as well, and we'll see you back the end of August. So with that motion moved by Councilor Ravitz and seconded by Councilor Michelli, that council move into closed session at 10:12 p.m. to discuss matters pursuant to sections 239(2)(b)(d)(f) of the Municipal Act 2001, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters of identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. All in favor? And that's carried. And just for yourself, Monty, and Dave, that we won't. There's nothing more afterwards when we come back out. Okay, just a motion that council adjourn the closed session at 11:03 PM and reconvene in open session. Councillor Van Passen and Michelle. All those in favor? Carried. A motion that staff report PW 19-48 appointments to the Climate Change Adaptation Committee be received as information, and that Richard Hamill, Kathy Salvatore, and Doug Moyart be appointed to the Norfolk County Climate Change Adaptation Committee for a term commencing immediately and ending upon the 31st of July, 2021. Is everything okay? Okay. Councillor Van Passen and Councillor Michelle moved and seconded that. All those in favor? It's carried. Finally, actually not finally, motion moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Michelle, that bylaw 2019-80 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Norfolk County at this council meeting held on the 9th day of July 2019 be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with the corporate